Hello everyone, welcome back to Music Impossible. I'm Professor Jim, this is AP Music Theory. And in just a minute, we're going to kick off lesson number 9 and chapter 3, where we're going to get into different types of scales and modes. Before we get started, I want to invite you, if you're listening or watching this on YouTube for free, we offer a full classroom opportunity that includes lesson videos, worksheets, quizzes, tests, and additional resources to get the full experience and to really hone and get ready for your AP Music Theory exam. All right, let's dive into chromatic scales. The first thing we're going to look at, let's take a look at the keyboard over here. And a chromatic scale is a scale that is considered to be symmetrical, and it includes all available pitches in Western music. In Western music, we use a half step or half tone system. In other types of music, there are actually quarter tones or fractions of the semitones or half tones that we use. But in this case, we have 12 available pitches to us. You can see going up here, we have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, and B. And then we have our enharmonic equivalents. And an enharmonic note, we'll spell it out here, enharmonic. There are notes available to us that have the same tone, the same pitch, if you will, but they can be different notes. Now, hang on to that idea, because as we develop our skills in intervals and chord structure and scales and key signatures, we'll learn more about these enharmonic notes. But an enharmonic note has the same pitch, but they're called different things. You can see A sharp and B flat, the exact same button on the piano or whatever instrument you play, or if you're singing, you would sing the same pitch. G sharp, A flat, G flat, F sharp, E flat, D sharp, and D flat, C sharp. We can also these notes here that do not have a black key in between, we could also have a C flat and a B sharp, technically, and then an F flat and an E sharp, respectively. There were those two spots there. We don't have black keys in between white keys on the piano. When we go up a chromatic scale, we go up just one note at a time, and we always use sharps. And then when we come back down the chromatic scale, we use flats. So let's go over here to Sibelius, and every time we move up a note chromatically, we call that a half step. A half step is when you go to the very next note available to us. So we'll use alto clef here, and we'll start with eighth notes, and we'll just start with middle C, and go right up the scale. Now notice that Sibelius doesn't do a great job here of staying with sharps all the way up. It defaults to kind of choosing what it wants to along the way. So we're going to use the enharmonic of all of these flats so we do this correctly. There's a respell button right there on Sibelius. So we're going to change this note as well and respell that B flat and make that into an A sharp. So that would be the correct way to notate a chromatic scale, starting with C, middle C, and ending on C5, with the ascending scale being using all of the sharps. On the second staff, let's kind of do the same thing but backwards, and notice, let's see what Sibelius is going to get wrong here. Remember, when we descend, we want to use flats. So let's go ahead and grab the enharmonic of this G sharp. There we go, and let's see, we have an enharmonic here of F sharp. We'll respell that, and then it looks like we also have a C sharp here. Make that a C flat. There we go. So that is the correct way to notate the ascending and descending chromatic scale. Now, we often don't use chromatic scales regularly in our composing. Sometimes they're used as an effect in film and television. If you have a descending chromatic scale, it can sound like falling, or your classic old school animation cartoons that the piano or the anvil is falling from a tall building and crushes our character as sort of a comedy bit. A lot of times we'll use a descending chromatic scale to create that effect. And conversely, if we do the ascending chromatic scale, it sounds like something is rising. And so that's become sort of synonymous with those effects. But we will be using chromatics at different times in our composing, and certainly when we get into more advanced harmonies. Right, now that we understand a little bit about half steps, a chromatic scale is that continuation of one half step after another, just going to the very next note on the piano keyboard. As you might imagine, if I have one half step and I have a second half step, well, what's 1/2 plus 1/2? Equals a whole, right? So if I have two half steps, that's going to equal a whole step. So we're going to talk a lot about half steps and whole steps in this lesson today and understanding what they are. A half step is the very next note. Whole step is going to be two notes. Two half steps is going to equal one whole step. And that's going to be evident here as we start to learn about the major scale formula. A lot of formulas, kind of like math, but not as hard in music, where we can apply these formulas to all different situations and you'll come up with the right answer. And so we're going to start with the major scale formula today. And let's go ahead and just write out the letters of a C major scale. Now, many of you have played instruments. You understand how to play scales. You've maybe memorized all of your scales as part of your education through the years. So the C major scale on the piano starts with any C and goes up one note at a time and plays all of the white keys only until it arrives back at C. Whenever we have a C major scale, the tonic is going to be called C. The tonic is the first note or the home note of any key or scale. So if I was playing an A major scale, the tonic would be A. Every single one of these notes has its own name. We'll learn those down the road. But let's just learn this one today. Tonic. The tonic is that home note or first note. Now, every scale has what we call scale degrees. And a scale degree is just a number assigned to each note going up that scale. So as I ascend, my first scale degree or my tonic note is C in a C major scale. And as I go up, I have the 6th scale degree and the 7th scale degree. And then finally I arrive at 8, which is actually 1 again. First scale degree, particularly if I was continuing on for a second octave. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and scale degree. Now, this is something that'll be referred to in this class and beyond. Hey, which scale degree is that chord built on? And so that's a term we're going to use a lot, scale degree. Let's talk about the formula now. The formula of a major scale. We have whole, whole. So these are the intervals in between each note of a major scale. Now, what's interesting is I could take this formula and apply it to any note. I could start on any note on the keyboard, any note on the staff, and if I were to apply whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half as the intervals between each note, I would build a major scale. So this is something we're going to memorize, we're going to remember. You have a kind of a big assignment after this class to write out every single major scale based on using this formula. All right, let's check out the keyboard. Let's do the same thing here. Just give ourselves a visual representation on the keyboard. I like using the keyboard visually. It helps us see things. We can clearly see our half steps and our whole steps. So there's our formula there for our major scale. And these intervals, whole steps and half steps, represent the distance between each note. So the first distance is going to be that first W. It's a whole step. A whole step is made up of two half steps, right? So our first half step is C to C sharp, and our second half step is from C sharp to D. First whole step out of the way, done. The interval between the next two notes, scale degree 2 and 3, is another whole step. So we're going to do two half steps to measure that out. Our second half step comes from D sharp down to E. Second interval done. Here we are. Now we're at our first half step of our major scale. That third interval there is always a half step. Since there's no black key between E and F, we're just going to go right to F. That is a half step right there. First half step done. Now we have our 3 whole steps in a row. F sharp, F to F sharp, F sharp to G. Whole step. G to G sharp to A. Whole step. A to A sharp, and A sharp to B. There's our 3 whole steps in a row. 1, 2, 3. We're left with our final interval of our major scale, and it's a half step, no black key between B and C. So we're going to go right over there, and that is our major scale. So we have the distance between C and D, whole step. D and E, whole step. E and F, half, and then whole, 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 half. The distance between every note in a major scale. Let's try the same thing now on F major, where our tonic note, remember that tonic note is the home note, and we're going to build the same thing starting with F. The interval formula doesn't change just because we start on a different note. We still have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So let's build that. Our first whole step, F to F sharp to G, whole step number 1. Whole step number 2, G to G sharp to A. There's our second whole step. So now we have the notes F, G, and A. Now here's our first half step here. So we have to go A to where to get the next note. Has to be some version of a B. Half step ends right there. So our third note is going to be a B flat in the key of F major. And then from B flat, now we have a whole step from here. So from B flat, we're going to do a half step to B natural, and then a second half step to make that whole step complete to C. So now we have F, G, A, B flat, and C. Now we have 2 more whole steps from C to C sharp to D, whole step. D to D sharp to E, whole step. And then our final half step is right here between E and F, no black key in the middle. So we just go straight to F. So our F major scale is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. One more. Let's do a difficult one. And let's do G sharp major scale. So now our tonic is G sharp, right? Tonic is the home note, and that's going to equal G sharp in this case. Now, what I like to do with these hard ones, and you might want to do this for your assignment as well, is I'm going to go right here. I'm going to put a G sharp by this G, and I know that the scale is going to begin and end with G sharp. So I'll come down here and I'll put a G sharp at the end. So I know my 1st and 8th scale degree are G sharp. And I also know that since every letter of the music alphabet has to be represented, I'm going to have some version of every letter, some version of A, B, C, D, E, and F. And our job using the formula is to figure out what that is. So just as a reminder, I might write this down somewhere on a piece of paper. We'll write it at the top, our major scale formula. Let's start. So we're going to start with G sharp right here, and we're going to go 1 whole step because our first interval is a whole step. G sharp to A, and A to A sharp. So A sharp is my 2nd scale degree. Okay, first whole step done. Let's do my next whole step. I have to do a whole step from A sharp, so A sharp to B, and B to C. But wait a minute. You said, Professor Jim, I need to have a version of every letter. This is a C. Do I write C? No, you don't write C. You have to write an enharmonic equivalent to C so that B is represented. So guess what? B becomes B sharp. That is your 2nd whole step. G sharp, A sharp, B sharp. Now we need some version of a C with this half step. That's pretty easy. We're just going to go C to C sharp right there. So we know our 4th scale degree is a C sharp. Now we need our 3 whole steps in a row. Let's do that. C sharp to D is a half step. D to D sharp is our whole step. So our version of D in a G sharp major scale is D sharp. Let's go to our 6th scale degree. We're going to need another whole step. So we got D sharp to E to F. Oh, same problem as before. We need to have some version of an E. We can't write F for our 6th scale degree. So what's the enharmonic equivalent to F? E sharp. We have our 3rd whole step now to work on. So from F, or from E sharp, I should say, we're going to go to F sharp to G. I'm all the way to G now, and I still don't have an F note here. This is where it starts to get a little tricky, and you might have this on your assignments in a couple of places. But this would be an F double sharp, which is marked by an X. It's usually a stylized type of an X, sometimes with little dots here on the end of the X. So a double sharp symbol you would have to put next to F. So there it is, your 7th scale degree in a G sharp major scale is F double sharp. That is that final whole step before we get to our last half step, which is going to go from our F double sharp to G sharp back to our tonic. All right, that's it for today. Next time, we're going to get into a little bit more about major scales and start getting into key signatures as we continue down chapter 3. See you next time.